Carl is it, man. Carl is right in the booth. I'm telling you, let me bring my friend on the screen. Um, how's it going today, my friend?
Hey, Rasheed, how are you?
I'm doing pretty good, Carl, and we have a whole lot of news to discuss today. And before we talk about the Syrian, Iranian, Israeli, Russian crisis, as I know that the Russian general and his advisor was killed. Carl, I'm gonna give you a take on it, and I want you to give me your thoughts on it and your analysis about this, because I see this often when something happens to Russia. Immediately when something happens to Russia, they immediately put it on Ukraine as the culprits. And I believe that is to downplay the involvement, the planning, and the control that is the American and the Western way of doing things. They don't want to escalate it because if they admit that this was done by the Americans or the British or the French, then the Russian forces would be forced to respond. And I believe that when Russia does this, they do a disservice to the war. They do a disservice to their political and military standing. And I also believe that this gives America and NATO the upper hand and only allows them to escalate more. They continue to escalate, and Russia takes it on the chin. And I also believe, I know this is a lot, but I want to put it all together because I want you to give me your take on it. And I also believe that this happens and Trump comes out and he'll say something like, I think we should negotiate. I need to meet with Vladimir Putin. I don't think that Biden should have given Ukraine deep strike weapons. They should not be allowed to strike in Russia. I believe this is the good cop, bad cop that America is playing against Russia and hoping that Russia will hold off till Trump gets in office, and then Russia is forced to eat the same thing over and over again. What do you say about it?
Well, I think right now what we're witnessing is the outgoing Biden administration in its last days. They're trying to light fire all over the world. I mean, this is part of the continual escalation that started with Biden authorizing deeper strike into Russia using American attack and missiles that's operated by U.S. personnel and with targets selected by U.S. intelligence with U.S. satellite. This and Rasheed, if you listen to the mainstream media, they will have you believe that it's a bunch of Ukrainians on a rickety boat that sabotage Nord Stream, right? They apparently it's just a bunch of amateur guys on their boat on a weekend, and then they somehow were able to dive in and sabotage the most important infrastructure of Germany in the most NATO monitored water. By the way, Baltic is floated with NATO vessels and their safe surveillance. It's just, so this is what I believe is going on. It's Biden is continually poisoning the well. So there's no possibility when Trump takes power in January 20th to have any kind of reconciliation, any kind of reset with Russia. They want to make sure the war is baked in, and whether the detail who carried it out. I mean, does it really matter? U.S. is funding the war right now. U.S. is supporting the Ukraine with weapons, with money. This is U.S. war against Russia. This is not a Ukraine war, just Ukraine war with Russia. It's the same thing. Like, this is not like people talk about Syria. It's not a organic Syrian bottom-up revolution. This is a multinational effort to do a regime change. And U.S. is very much deeply involved. The United States, I was just listening to Jeffrey Sachs' interview with Tucker Carlson, and Jeffrey Sachs mentioned what Henry Kissinger had said after the collapse of the Soviet Union, when there was a discussion on whether to expand NATO eastwards. And there was some people were saying, wait, why do we need to do that? Russia no longer presenting a threat they're friendly now. Soviet Union collapsed, and Russia is a much weaker state. We don't need to do this. Expanding NATO is not going to further security. We can always have the option to expand NATO later if Russia turn out to be belligerent. But Henry Kissinger said something interesting. He said, if we cannot provoke Russia when they're weak, you rather we provoke them when they're strong. So the idea is always provoke Russia. They're always going to escalate. It doesn't matter whether Putin back in early 2000 made the overture to apply for NATO membership, and Clinton laughed about it. He said, "Oh, let me check with my people." Of course, he comes back. So, sorry, my people says no. So this is always the part of the plan is laid out by Zabrinsky, actually, in his book, the Grand Chessboard. He said, of course, Zabrinsky is wrong on many things, but his idea illustrates the perfect American mentality. He said, Russia, are they going to ally? Who are they going to turn to? China? Iran? Unlikely. This is a time Russia only have one choice, is to accede to the American demands. Of course, that turned out to be completely wrong. But Biden followed the strategy to the letter. Biden himself, back in the 1990s, actually, when Biden was still coherent and not a hollow shell like he is today, he said, he actually laughed about it. He said, Russia, what's Russia going to do? They're going to turn to China? They're going to ally with Iran? that's and he was laughing about it. He's like, go ahead.
I remember that.
And this is play out exactly. I mean, they have been run for so many years. They've been run for the last 30 years, but they're persistent because they surround themselves with some very mediocre, I wouldn't even say mediocre, just some very stupid advisors, like Jake Sullivan. Jake Sullivan is probably one of the worst U.S. national security advisor in history. Jake Sullivan, by the way, is also the same person who wrote an email to Hillary Clinton back in 2012 who said, Al Qaeda is on our side in Syria, right? Mm-hmm. And now you're going to tell me that United States is not behind the rebranded Al Qaeda taking over in Syria now, while Jake Sullivan is the current national security advisor? I mean, come on. It's all the dots are here. You just need to make the connection. So I think this is what's going on. The Biden administration is trying to escalate. They're basically lighting the world on fire because they're going out of the office and they're like, you know what? We're just going to create an absolute mess. And this is, we talked about this earlier. It doesn't matter who becomes the president, Biden or Trump. But the deep state behind Biden administration, they are trying to bake in the conflict. They're trying to set things in stone so it will be very difficult to alter course. Even by a maverick like Trump, because Trump is unpredictable. They don't trust Trump to continue the same policy, so they want to preempt Trump's coming to office by making sure the wars are baked in and there's no deviation from that.
I'm going to play a clip, but before I play the clip about the what's going on with the general, because I want to get back to what we were talking about, what you brought up about the ties to Al Qaeda and the takeover of Syria. But I want to just for maybe about 2 or 3, maybe 4 minutes stay on this this assassination for the general. I want to play this clip, but I want to preface the clip with this. When one sees the because they have the video of it, of the general being killed and his assistant, and I started to play it for you guys, but no, I'm not going to play it. You guys can look it up on YouTube or on Rumble or Odyssey or something and look at it. But for them to know where he would be at his most vulnerable point right now, that is outside the scope of Ukrainian intelligence. So it had to be monitored by a more sophisticated intelligence agency for that to take place. America has eyes almost everywhere, trying to spy on everything. So she would be the prime candidate before anybody could lay the blame or point the finger at the United States or the UK. Immediately, Russia pulls the rug from under their feet to specifically point towards Ukraine and only Ukraine, which is absolutely crazy to me before an investigation was even started. But I want to play this. It's two short clips. One is a minute and one is
We all grieve upon the tragic death of Lieutenant General Igor Kirillov. We understand that this is an irreparable loss. We also understand that this was brought upon by a thuggish, terrorist, pro-fascist Ukrainian regime. This was surely a terrorist attack. You can't categorize it any other way. All the circumstances will be determined, and we offer our condolences. I am absolutely sure that all the culprits will be found. This will be done. Given what's happened, we have had a minute of silence in the State Duma to honor Igor Kirillov. And also we've spoken out about necessity to step up security and protection of top-level officials who have contributed and continue to contribute to our country's defense. Igor Kirillov was behind the Sputnik COVID vaccine. He's played a key role in exposing the US biolabs in Ukraine. I think that it was the reason behind his murder, and it may have been not only Ukraine's SBU, but also Western special services, but the investigators will uncover the truth. I find it hard predicting a possible reaction of the international community because it's been acting outside of reasonable logic and international law. But it should be there and should denounce the attack and demand a trial. The West has become an accomplice to all these Ukrainian crimes, and this one isn't the first one, unfortunately, but hopefully it will be the last time our nation's eminent person is killed by them. The West must understand that they're an accessory to crimes. Ukraine should have been designated a terrorist state long ago. There's been a row of murders, and what's happened now is another push towards this.
I'm going to play the next clip, but the MP in the Russian parliament doesn't understand. The West already knows that it is a party to the crime because they are the main culprits behind it. It's just that they don't care. And it seems like Russia, it's hard for Russia to get that in their head. But I want to play this right after that, and we'll come back with the comments.
It appears to have been a heinous terrorist act. I personally knew Lieutenant General Igor Kirillov. He was a prominent expert in his field, and perhaps unusually for an army general, he was a very open public personality. He appeared on TV and in the media outlining Russian policies in the field of combating the proliferation of nuclear weapons, chemical and biological. We cooperated within the framework of a parliamentary inquiry last year on the infamous biological laboratories organized by the United States in Ukraine and other countries, including post-Soviet countries. Stories of previous years, like this hoax about so-called Novichok in Britain, the alleged chemical attacks in Syria, which turned out to be staged. So all this combined, I presume, played a role. It was a political killing, apart from anything else. Perhaps it was timed to prevent or to undermine possible contacts between Moscow and the incoming US administration, creating a negative background for any discussion on Ukraine and other issues. Who profited from this? Evidently, it's not only the current regime in Kiev, but also its sponsors on this side of the Atlantic and beyond. The background of state-sponsored terrorism in Ukraine, well, considering that Ukraine used to be a state, certainly is long enough.
A few things he said up in there. The end part was Ukraine used to be a state, but I want to rewind it a little bit for you and say that to find out in court or if there's a crime committed in the United States, what they do, they look at motive, opportunity, and who benefits the most. Those are some of the three main principles that detectives look at. And for them to have a suspect, they check to see if there's a rape. They go look and see if there are any citizens in that area that have committed rape before. And if there's a molestation, they see if there are pedophiles in the neighborhood. So when we look at this killing of the general, all one has to do is say the United States killed multiple Iraqi generals. They killed General Soleimani. They killed another Iranian general in Syria. They killed a Lebanese general. So this gives us a main culprit or a main suspect in this. Why, when it comes to geopolitics and international affairs, we see a lack of the applications of what a detective would do to solve the crime?
Well, I think Russia is approaching this very delicately because they understand what Biden administration is trying to do, because Biden administration is trying to poison the well for the incoming Trump administration. When Trump has specifically said he wants to end the war in Ukraine, he wants to have peace, he wants to have a phone call with Putin. This is why I think the Russian people who are now speaking out publicly, they're trying to put the blame squarely on Ukraine. I mean, they understand this as well as we do. This is not the Ukraine war is really an American war against Russia, but they are trying to leave the room open for negotiation and for dialogue, because Biden is going to be out of the office in a month, and there's still possibility of some sort of rapprochement or even a deal worked out with Trump. I mean, they're leaving the door open. So they are not trying to. They're not. What they're trying to do is not to fall into the trap that Biden laid out for them, which is, to make this conflict to escalate the conflict to the next level. So this is why they're. I mean, they understand this is look, Ukrainian. Even if this is Ukrainian intelligence work, they are just cat's paw for United States. Because what have we seen? We've seen Ukrainians mercenary turns out in North Africa. They turn out in Syria. We know the Ukrainian drone operator play a big role in Syria, targeting the army generals of Syrian Arab army just before the fall of Assad's government. So how did these Ukrainians suddenly pop up everywhere in the world, and in all the regions that has almost nothing to do with Ukraine? I mean, but everything to do with a U.S. strategy to dominate. I mean, the Russians understand this, but they're trying to be diplomatic. They're trying to leave the doors open for future negotiation with the incoming Trump administration. This is why they're just squarely putting the blame on Ukrainian right now. I mean, their focus right now is to win the war in Ukraine, and to establish the facts on the ground. This is why I think for Trump, I don't know what Trump's his idea of making peace with Russia is, but right now we hear a lot of ideas coming from Trump advisors, that the people Trump have picked to be in his cabinet, and some of these ideas are just it's just totally moronic. They're saying, well, we'll turn the Ukraine conflict into a frozen conflict. I mean, if anything, Russia has learned its lesson about frozen conflict and ceasefire. They got cheated in Minsk agreement, Minsk 2. They again in Syria, they froze the conflict in Syria in 2020. The lesson from all these from the past is you don't let the conflict frozen when you are on the winning side. You finish it. You finish the fight. That's what Russia intends to do. That's what they're focused right now. And by putting the blame also on the Ukrainian, it's also helped to shape the public opinion. They're guiding their own public opinion to support the drive to win the war in Ukraine. And that's what Russia is focused on right now, rather to expand the scope of the conflict to like a global conflict with the United States. So I think this is what's going
on. I understand, and you understand that. But first of all, they're putting a lot of faith in that the incoming administration would adhere to their word. They're also putting a lot of faith in whether the deep state will allow them to adhere to their word, all the while absorbing high casualties. And when I mean high casualties, one general, especially from his level, is a lot of casualties in the eyes of the people around the world. And all one has to do is flip the mirror and say, how would America react if Russia announced that it wanted a strategic defeat of NATO, and then NATO generals, even though America may have been fighting in Syria, NATO generals started winding up dead? How would America and NATO would react to this? I think in most media settings, most people expect Russia to absorb the losses. You can only absorb so much before there is a demand then to strike out and say, okay, for me to get my lick back, for me to strike back is not an escalation. It is to even the balance. Because right now things are so out of balance geopolitically, because America is continuing to get go beyond what is acceptable in international politics and international wars around the world. She continues to exceed every limit, and with this thing so out of whack, being somewhat pacifist on responding could cause a misunderstanding and lead to the very thing that they're trying to prevent.
Well, I mean, right now Russia can afford to temper the conflict, because they're the one that's winning on the battlefield. They're establishing the facts on the ground. They're obliterating all the Ukrainian units right now, so they can afford to wait a month. They only have to wait for a month to see what the incoming Trump administration will do. I mean, they have all the options to change course, to further escalate. But I think they're choosing to hold back, at least diplomatically in rhetoric, because they know they're winning the war in Ukraine. They are in no hurry. They're in no hurry to come to any kind of a peace agreement, because the peace will be on Russia's turn. When the peace, you will not be a peace imposed by America. It will be a peace that Russia finds acceptable. This is why I was listening to Jeffrey Sachs Tucker Carlson interview. He said, a lot of those ideas that was floated around by Trump advisors, they would not work, because what they talk about is have a ceasefire, frozen conflict, but that's not the root of the issue. The root of the issue is Russia do not want American and NATO missiles on its border that could strike Russia. And what Biden has done is to prove Russian worst fears by authorizing American missile strike deep into Russia. And so Russia would not allow the conflict just be merely frozen until the resolve the issue is which is they don't want NATO missiles in Ukraine. They don't want NATO in Ukraine. So unless Trump make that call to Putin and say, hey, I understand your security concerns and we agree with you, we're going to tell Ukraine to accept the peace deal that you would like to see, which is Ukraine not in NATO. Unless that conversation happens, I don't think that the Americans are going to get their way of a merely frozen conflict, because that's not Russia did not launch a special military operation just to have another frozen conflict. They did that because the frozen conflict from the Minsk agreement did not play out, because the West ultimately didn't abide by the Minsk agreement. So Russia can afford to dial down the rhetoric at this point, because they're the ones that dominate in the battlefield. So I think they have some leeway to wait and see, to wait a month. All they got to do is just wait. Meanwhile, it's not like they're stopping the war. The Russian forces are continuing to advance, or like the NATO saying North Korean forces are continuing to advance, and they are demolishing all the Ukrainian units, both in Ukraine and in the Kursk region of Russia. So that while they're focusing doing that, they're also waiting to see what how the Trump administration is going to approach this. And I don't think Russian people in the Russian government would be so naive to be like Gorbachev to trust the verbal promises of the Western leaders. And after their own experience with the Minsk Agreement and Minsk Agreement 2, I don't think they will fall for another Western brokered ceasefire and frozen conflict. This is just my opinion, my 2 cents. I think this is why they are people don't realize. A lot of people don't even realize Russians are winning this war. They are the ones who have the initiative in the battlefield. So all U.S. can do, under the outgoing Biden administration, is continue to crank up the pressure, continue to crank up sanctions. They're trying to go after. Now, recently, you have the EU top diplomat. She just came out and imposed sanction against India and China for doing business with Russia, for supposedly enabling Russia, because some Chinese drone companies are supposedly enabling Russia in Ukraine, which is completely ridiculous. When Europe is stabbing itself right now for America for no good reasons, and so Russia is waiting for everything to play out. They can't afford to, because they are the ones with the boots on the ground. They're the ones that's winning the war.
And speaking of Europe, let me play this clip here that goes right in line with what you're saying. Europe is killing itself to try to continue U.S. policies. So I want to play this short clip on that.
Slovakia's future does not align with Brussels. That's the message from a conference of the nation's Homeland Party that wants the EU to scrap sanctions against Russia. The party says it's promoting Slovak national interests and has initiated a petition to mend ties with Moscow, saying Russia is not an enemy. The motion has already received more than 160,000 signatures from Slovak citizens. Some local politicians say sanctions are leading to a collapse of the European bloc.
I think that everyone who is involved in economics knows that after the obvious inevitable defeat of the Bandera regime in Ukraine, which allowed the collective West to drag itself into this war, they understand that one day this war will end, and that we will also have to pay the U.S. for Lend-Lease, because Ukraine is experiencing huge economic and financial problems today, and will probably be forced to declare bankruptcy after the war, and it is the member states of the European Union that will have to pay off its debts. We are here to stand up for ourselves, as a Slovak nation, as Slovak citizens. And if our initiative grows into something international, as I said, it could be the final nail into the coffin of what was originally a good project, an economic project of cooperation between states, which has somehow creepily turned into a dictate of what these states can think, what they can do, and what not only their present, but also their future should look like. I believe that the biggest risk the European Union will ever face is a collapse based on economic decline. As I said, Germany is threatened by deindustrialization, and this will affect not only its economy, but also, of course, the standard of living of the population. The same is true in France, where the national debt is growing at an enormous rate. The Italians are facing a euro crisis, and these problems will only get worse.
Našim cieľom
Is it our goal to preserve the current decaying colonial EU? No, our goal should be to preserve us, Slovaks, in cooperation with any nation that wants to cooperate with us. And let's not forget that we are not only Slovaks, but also Slavs. We, in the Slovak movement of Renaissance, see this very clearly. Everything that is happening in Ukraine is an attempt to drive one big wedge between the Slavic nations, because someone does not want the Slavic nations to communicate, cooperate, be economically and politically strong. This is the eternal onslaught of the Anglo-Saxons and Germans to the east. Slovakia's future is not in the European Union, not in this European Union. It is time to start cooperating with the BRICS countries. There is economic power there, and there will be political power there. In conclusion, I will say something simple and quite clear. When this war's over, Slovakia should be on the winning side, and the European Union will not be the winner. Today, in the states that are the locomotive of European integration, particularly in Germany, there are significant and influential political forces that have entered and are entering election campaigns with ideas of leaving the EU and returning to the German mark. This is already happening in Germany, so, as my colleague said, we are convinced that the European Union is threatened with disintegration.
Paul, this is almost tantamount to getting a gun, loading all the chambers with bullets and putting it to the skull, because China had become Europe's largest trading partner, but it was superseded by the United States this year because of the expensive natural gas, liquefied gas that the United States is charging its so-called allies today. But China, according to this, it says now China is the EU's largest import partner, accounting for over 20 to 30% of the EU's imports. China imports all things like electronics, computers, mobile phones, tablets, and all things electronic, plus other stuff. And it was saying that there was almost $1 trillion in trade between them. And to sanction what is essentially your largest trading partner, because they were prior to the U.S. sanctioning Russian gas so that they can get the monopoly on gas to Europe. Isn't this suicide, economic suicide, to perpetuate a war that is not beneficial to anyone?
Well, let's face the fact that all these top EU politicians, von der Leyen, Baerbock, etc., all these ones, they're not because they're not there to serve the European interests. They're there to be the spokeswomen, a spokesperson for United States, for Washington. That's how they got selected, not elected. They got selected, and they are, so their interest is to continue to sprout Washington's lines, screw what the Europeans actually living through. The disconnect between Brussels and the common average working Europeans is so great. What the Slovak politician has said, where's the lie? Where is the lie? The Europe is declining. Europe is self-sabotaging. Following U.S. policy on a collision course with Russia only dragged the Europe into the abyss. And guess what? Guess what Trump just recently said? Trump said, China and U.S. should work together. We can solve all the world's problems. Where does that leave Europe? While Europe is following the U.S. Urging to cut off ties with China, with India, with everybody, and cut themselves off with Russian gas. And United States have the option to turn on a dime and change the policy and leave the Europeans in the dark, leaving them holding the bag. Europe is screwed. I'm sorry, Europe is screwed right now because they have these kind of spineless politicians who would not stand up to the American mechanician on the continent.
And now we see them cheering for the jihadi leaders who have taken over Syria, which we'll pivot to because you made a lot of excellent points at the beginning. And it seems like no matter where you turn, the West is on the wrong side. And they may win a small battle, but they're losing the war. And it seems like it's not adding up in the minds of the people. So I want to play this clip here, and then I want you to elaborate and give us your thoughts on this situation, because on one hand, the U.S. and the EU always scream about fighting terrorism, and yet they are always the incubators and protagonists of the terrorists. And then when the terrorists are pushed into power by their hands in the background, all of a sudden they turn from terrorists to freedom fighters or dissatisfied civilians. It's absolutely insane. So, and this not only has takes a military toll on the U.S. and the West, but it takes a financial toll on them. It takes a cultural toll on them. And then when these people flood into Europe and in the United States, the first thing they want to do is start screaming about non-assimilation and all of this stuff instead of dealing with the problems before they spread into a cancer that cannot be treated. So I want to play this clip for you here, and then we'll come back.
Well, Western players certainly wasted no time celebrating jihadists and militants and mercenaries taking control of Damascus, all the while claiming that the only thing they want is security in the Middle East. Well, let's get some more detail on this. And across Live Talk contributor Rachel Marston now joining us here on the program as we continue with our breaking news coverage. Rachel, great to get you on so quickly. Just amazing when it comes to the reactions we're getting from certain Western players in the world, the Western media and political landscape seemingly celebrating the fall of Syria and leaving behind a potential terrorist's paradise, Rachel.
Yeah, well, the group that rampaged through Syria and rocked right up to Damascus, this group called Hayat Tahrir al-Sham, or HTS, wasn't just officially considered a terrorist group by Washington, but the European Union's Agency for Asylum's own website also describes them as, quote, frequently, and he has the Western media saying that his regime will be, quote, more lenient than the Taliban in Afghanistan. Wow. Let's not go crazy here. That's a pretty high bar. Right in black and white on the EU's website, it says that the objective of HTS is to, quote, establish Islamic rule in Syria by overthrowing Assad. Yet, the United Nations Special Envoy for Syria called the coup by the same group a, quote, watershed moment to which the EU looks forward with hope, or the UN looks forward to with hope for, quote, peace, reconciliation, dignity, and inclusion. Why stop there? Why not just ask for...
Carl, on the one hand, they want, whenever it suits the West, they're fighting terrorists. But then these terrorists, when they're in the pocket of the United States, they become freedom fighters. I mean, this is what is causing an outrage in the geopolitical arena, because people are saying America, the rules don't apply to America and her allies. They make the rules up as they go, and if you don't follow suit, they condemn you as being a tyrant, a regime, a dictator. And as similar to what they say when they get mad at China, they say Xi Jinping is a dictator. This man is governing 1.45 billion people, and he has the majority of the people backing him, but he's a dictator. And Joe Biden, he comes into office on suspicious circumstances, yet he's a duly elected, legitimate president. Go ahead, Carl.
I mean, the U.S. has nothing but consistent. The U.S. created Al-Qaeda. We all know this. U.S. fostered, shielded, supported Al-Qaeda in the one of the largest CIA Operation Cyclone. This is a war in Afghanistan against the Soviet. This is how Al-Qaeda came about. We had that famous article from the Independent, the newspaper in UK after the Soviet withdrawal, and they painted Osama bin Laden as this peaceful warrior who is on his way to reconstruct Afghanistan, to bring peace to Afghanistan. And the current leader the current ruler in Damascus, Giuliani, he was literally ISIS. He was locked up in American cell in Iraq together with ISIS founder al-Baghdadi. They were buddies, and Giuliani was sent by Baghdadi into Syria to create the ISIS Syria chapter. In fact, in 2014, Giuliani, in fact, declared a ISIS emirate in Syria, but then he had to quickly retract because his minders told him, okay, that don't look good. That don't look good. So and later he had to rebrand. He had to supposedly break with Al Qaeda publicly on CNN. CNN somehow has this. It always has the exclusive access to Giuliani and his jihadi buddies. And if you look at all the Western jihadis traveling to Syria to fight for ISIS, all of them have been monitored by Western intelligence agency for years. They turned a blind eye when they were going to Syria to overthrow Assad. I mean, turning a blind eye is a diplomatic way to put it. When according to Seymour Hersh, there's a well-established rat line when the CIA shipped all the jihadis that overthrew Gaddafi in Libya to send them via Turkey to Syria. And you think there's the same Western intelligence agencies that are sending these jihadis in Syria are somehow turning a blind eye to all these Western jihadis going from Europe to Syria. I mean, if anything, they probably encouraged it. This is how they solve their own domestic problems. Like, okay, go to Syria and stay there. And now there's a huge rebrand campaign again for Giuliani. He is getting hailed as a leader of the new Syria in all the Western mainstream media. Britain is talking about taking him off the terrorist list. United States expressed the same. Washington Post reported this. The UK and United States are considering to take off HTS from the terrorist list, and they might even take off the sanction on Syria now, because the whole Caesar's Act on Syria that was levied by Trump in his first term, that was designed to collapse the Assad government, and that succeeded. And so I fully expect they might even lift the sanction very soon, because the Caesar Act was due to expire at the end of this year. So in January 2025, the U.S. sanction on Syria is due for renewal or extension, and I think they might not extend it, and certainly they're gonna start going to Syria to do business. And this is all by design, by the way. Now you are seeing mainstream media publicly talking about the Turkey-Qatar gas pipeline. Remember when a lot of the people were saying this back in 2012, when the 2011 Syrian war started, they're like, oh, that's just conspiracy theory. You guys are crazy. You guys wearing tin hat foil. Now they're publicly talking about Turkey-Qatar gas pipeline might be back on, because this is why also, by the way, Qatar has been funneling tons of money into supporting the Syrian rebels, because they wanted that pipeline to go through Syria, to go to Turkey, to connect to Europe, and Europe wants this because they want a cheap, alternative to cheap Russian gas. So they, the liquefied LNG is just too expensive, because they have to process it, make the natural gas into liquefied natural gas, put on container ships, sent to Europe, whereas the pipeline is much cheaper option. And so now this is also NATO's plan to win Europe from Russian gas. Now there's plenty of gas in the Persian Gulf. Then it will be piped by Qatar through Syria to Turkey, and Turkey is happy to do that because they collect a transit fee. Just how they collect a transit fee of Azerbaijani oil that's going through Turkey to Turkey's Sihan port to supply Israel. Erdogan talks big about condemning Israel, but he never cut the oil supply to Israel. I mean, that's and there's also a lot of stolen oil from Syria that previously got redirected by ISIS to Iraq, to northern Iraq, where it was claimed, rebranded as Iraqi oil, and then got sent through the pipeline from Iraqi Kurdistan to Turkey, and then that oil also get piped from port to Israel. So Israel get cheap, discounted, stolen Syrian oil. So because Israel is also part of the conflict, they actively supported all these jihadis. We had reports from 2014, 2015 that these jihadis are getting treated in Israeli hospitals in Golan Heights, in the occupied Golan Heights. And now, I mean, the situation is great for Israel because Jolani has publicly said, we're not ready to fight Israel because we're concentrating on rebuild Syria. We actually want to maintain peace with Israel. But at the same time, his people are attacking PFLP, the Palestinian Liberation Front for Palestine. And they are attacking Palestinian resistance group in Syria while they say, oh, we're not strong enough to take on Israel.
Yeah.
We need peace. and this is a multinational effort, multi-year effort to overthrow Assad's government, to install a regime that will be more suited to the Western interests. The war started in 2011, in the so-called Arab Spring. And you have this is all outlined by Hillary Clinton, by the way. This is all outlined by Hillary Clinton, and in the email, also in email correspondence between Jake Sullivan, our current national security advisor, to Hillary Clinton. They're gonna cobble together all the Gulf Arab states, Saudi Arabia, UAE, Qatar, Turkey. They were looping Turkey. And all the NATO members plus Jordan, all the U.S. proxies, and then they're gonna funnel those jihadis for tons of money and weapons, and they're gonna overthrow Assad. This, by the way, is also the part of the plan. This is a long-term plan. Remember General Wesley Clark, right after 9/11, he talked about this. He said right after 9/11, he went to the Pentagon. One of his friends says, "Oh, we got this plan." Overthrow 7 countries in 5 years. And those countries are Lebanon, Syria, Iraq, Sudan, Somalia. So only one that's left. So they have done everything on that list. The only country left now is Iran. And Iran is probably next because Iran is also on Netanyahu's list. I mean that it's also it's just so happened the 7 countries on the list is also on the wish list of Bibi Netanyahu because he thinks these are the existential threat to Israel. And this is where Israel and United States kind of work hand in glove. And they so there's a lot of voices right now, a lot of chatter talking about hitting Iran, under the Trump administration. And we know Trump is 100% pro-Israel. So this is a very likely possibility. And and taking down Syria will, it's just part of the process for the bigger project of taking down Iran, because Syria serves as a land bridge for the axis of resistance for Iran to funnel arms and ammunition to Hezbollah in Lebanon. Now, after Israel have weakened Lebanon through their invasion, they're trying to cut off any potential supplies coming to Lebanon to Hezbollah. So the Syrian regime change will work out perfectly. Some people are going to say, "Oh, yes, but this is all problem of Assad because the people demand change." Well, a lot of the problems that was created in Syria was explicitly created by U.S. government policy, by sanctions. Caesar's Act that was signed into law by President Trump during his first term was to starve the Syrian population. So it will cause governmental collapse. At the same time, the United States, through its occupational forces and its proxies on the ground, they occupy 1/3 of the Syria that has the most water, that produce most wheat, oil, and gas. So people in the urban part of the Syria, they had no access to fuel, they have no access to food. They're being strangled by the U.S. sanctions. So so this is what we saw. U.S. sanction has ran its course, and you work out great for Israel because they're carrying out the Greater Israel project at the moment. They have pushed deeper into Syria. They're like only 20 kilometers from Damascus right now. They annexed another part of the Golan Heights that was Syrian territory, and now their goal is to put a wedge between Syria and Lebanon, so they will cut off any potential supply lines that will go from Syria into Lebanon to Hezbollah. That has always been Israeli goal, and now Benjamin Netanyahu accomplished it through these jihadi proxies. I mean, it's a great victory. It's a great victory for Israel. It's a great victory for United States and its NATO allies. It's great victory for Turkey, for Qatar. This is their multi-year, decade-long project, 13-year-long project of regime change. Finally happened, and it's the idea has always been to destabilize the Middle East. They don't. It's funny that U.S. envoy to Middle East keep on talking about peace and stability, but they never wanted peace and stability. When Hamas was in the process of negotiating peace deal with Israel, what did they do? Israel assassinated the negotiator, the ceasefire negotiator, right? When Hezbollah was negotiating with Israel for a ceasefire with a condition that they also have ceasefire in Gaza, what did they do? They assassinated Nasrallah, the leader of Hezbollah. Because Israel does not want negotiation. Israel does not want peace. It wants to create absolute chaos so they can create Greater Israel. And Greater Israel for them is a river to the river, from the river Nile to the river Euphrates, and everything in between. And that's a country of Lebanon, that's a country of Syria, and a huge portion of Iraq. And this is what Israeli army is doing right now on the ground. They're trying to, they're pushing east, trying to link up with their allies in the south of Syria, the Jews community, the D-R-U-Z-E, Jews. It's a religious community in Syria, and now Israel is claiming they are going there to provide protection for these religious communities from the jihadis. I mean, it's so convenient. Like, they came here to protect them from the harms from the jihadis that Israel has traditionally supported, and they are also trying to link up with the Kurds, who is basically serve as a proxy for U.S. in northeast Syria. I mean, Syria today is facing a very bleak and balkanized future, and this is what they always wanted. Israel did not want a strong, unified Syrian state as a neighbor. He wants a divided Syria. He wants divided Lebanon, and he got his ways. Now he wants to do Iran. That's a big one. That's a big one. We're gonna have to see how that one play out, because, like I said many times before, Iran is not like Iraq. When the United States launched the Iraq War, Saddam had no friends. Saddam had no friends because during the first Gulf War, this was back in 1991. I remember this because that's the time when I first came to the United States, and at that time, George Bush Sr. put together an international coalition against Iraq that included Syria. Syria actually sent a tank battalion to join the Americans to drive Saddam out of Kuwait. So back then, Saddam had no friends. But Iran is very different. Iran is much bigger, much more powerful than Iraq, and Iran has powerful friends like Russia and China. So this is not going to be and we saw how U.S. Navy performed against Houthi. So this is going to be a complete clusterfuck. And if it happens, we're going to have to see how this plays out.
I want to go back a couple of things that you said. Not only did they assassinate the Hamas negotiator, they did it 2 or 3 times. Each negotiator they killed. And as you said, they killed Nasrallah. But don't forget, prior to those episodes, the United States invited Soleimani to come to Iraq so that they could find out, and they assassinated Nasrallah. And I was telling people that Russia and Iran's inaction will come back to bite them, because it was Assad who refused the bribe from Ford, Ambassador Ford, who was sent to Syria for in the early 2000s to try to get Syria on its side for that exact pipeline that they removed him over. And he said no, because it would cut into Russia's strategic depth, and it would cut into Iran's strategic depth. And now for Iran and Russia to allow him to be deposed, I don't care what differences that you had with him. He stood on the front line. He allowed the transit of weapons into the axis of resistance. He told America no about the pipeline, because had that pipeline happened, when Europe sanctioned and when the United States sanctioned Russia, its economy would not be as resilient as it is right now, because they would have other means of getting oil and gas there. And then Iran, right before, a week before, matter of fact, I think it was a day or two before the offensive by the terrorists that are now occupying Damascus, they offered Assad a deal if he would cut arms supplies to Hezbollah, and he told them no. And immediately they went on the offensive, and Iran was nowhere to be found. And I noticed something about Assad when he made his first statement. As a matter of fact, Carl, I want to bring this up here for a second. I want you to just check this out, because it was not lost on me in this statement by Assad. It says Assad issues first statement following evacuation from Syria. And in his statement, he made no mention of what's supposed to be his number one ally, Iran. So I feel that he felt betrayed, especially when more of these stories are coming out about him allowing leaks so that IRGC generals could be assassinated and all of this stuff. All of this comes out after he was deposed. And now Iran is saying that they are going to reestablish their embassy in Damascus with the very terrorists that they are fighting across the region. And this is what Moscow, Sputnik, is reporting. It says, toppled Syrian President Bashar Assad said that his evacuation to Russia was preceded by a collapse of the army and a paralysis of state institutions, Assad's office said on Monday. With no viable means of leaving the base, Moscow requested that the base's command arrange an immediate evacuation to Russia on the evening of Sunday, December 8th. Now, he was evacuated on December 8th, which goes against the story that he left prior to the fall of Damascus, because December 8th is not prior to the fall of Damascus. And it says, this took place a day after the fall of Damascus following the collapse of the final military positions and resulting paralysis of all remaining state institutions. And this is what Sputnik reports. It says, Assad underscored that he did not abandon his people and the army, adding that he was evacuated from Khmeim following the instructions from Russia to the base. Now, from the base. Now, in another thing on RT, when they put up his statement, he made no mention at all of Iran. None. Why would you think he made no mention of Iran? And I want to ask you also, Iran said that it was its number one supporter of Assad and Syria. If that is so, and I know a lot of the gossip is out there saying that Iran is aggravated with Assad because he clamped down on Shiites worshiping in Shia. But Assad is a part of the Shiite. The Alawite is a branch of Shiite Islam. So that does not hold water. So why do you think that Assad made no mention of Iran in his first statement after being deposed and flying to Syria? And more importantly, why didn't his so-called closest ally allow him to be evacuated to their country instead of Russia?
Well, I don't know why Assad didn't mention Iran, but I don't think there's much Iran and Russia could do at this point, because the collapse of Syrian Arab army was so sudden. By the time of Doha talks between Iran, Turkey, and Russia, the fact has already been established on the ground. The jihadis already on the already entering Damascus. It was too late. Russia and Iran poured billions into Syria back in 2015 to push back the tides of jihadists supported by the CIA and the NATO countries. But what happened was the 2019 Caesars Act imposed by United States really took its toll in the last 5 years. When the country, when there was a ceasefire, when the conflict was frozen in 2019, 2020, people in Syria expected to get back to normal, but life didn't get back to normal because U.S. sanctions. U.S. sanctions was there to make sure the life do not get back to normal. And what I heard was like generals, officers in the Syrian Arab army, they're getting paid like $30 a month, and the recruits are getting by with $7 a month. I mean, they're barely surviving, they're barely scraping by. So that really destroyed morale. And when this launches operation, the Gulf country also employ a lot of money, a lot of bribe money. In many cases, we saw the Syrian Arab army didn't fight. The soldiers received order to retreat or pull back because their commanders had been in talks with intermediaries in UAE or other Gulf countries who probably paid them to pull back. And the collapse was so sudden. There's only a fight that happened on the jihadis march into Damascus was a couple of days in Hama, and even there, the soldiers were told to retreat by their commanders. We're still not sure. We're still not sure exactly how that chain of command, who issued the order for the general retreat. But the fact was, after the Syrian Arab army pulled back from Hama, there was no natural defense between there to Damascus. It was all flat plain. The jihadis literally just rode in pickups Just like how they rode into Mosul back in 2014 when ISIS took Mosul and the Iraqi army melted away. This is exactly what happened in Syria. The things unfolded in such a rapid terms. Everything happened in about 10 days. It started in November 29th, November 30th, and they took over Aleppo in a couple days, and then they started marching south. The Syrian Arab army put up a couple days of fighting around Hama, but again, this is where they were told to pull back, abandoning the city. There's really not much Russia and Iran could do. Russia is, first of all, it's preoccupied with the Ukraine war. It's not like 2015 when they could devote a lot of resources to Syria. Now, Iran could do more because they're not involving a war. But there's conflicting reports. There's sources coming from Iranian side that said they offered support to Assad and they warned Assad about a jihadi offensive, but those offers were turned down, and that Assad preferred to believe that he's dealing with rapprochement with the Gulf Arab countries would make sure nothing goes wrong. So there are different narratives right now coming out. It's hard to establish the facts on the ground currently, but what we have seen is that what we know is that the collapse of Syrian Arab army was so sudden that it was too late. It's too late for Russia and Iran to really salvage what's left of the Syrian government, because by the time when they're holding the meeting in Doha, supposedly to resolve the conflict, the jihadis was already in Damascus. I mean, at that point, anything is too late. They just kind of trying to cut their losses at that point because I'm sure Russia and Iran did not like the turn of the event that happened, but I think they did what they could, and there's not much they could be doing. Because I remember I followed the Syrian war from its earliest onset back in 2011. Russia and Iran spent tons of effort, billions in treasure, a lot of blood to help Syrian Arab army to fight back, to push the rebels out of Aleppo back in 2016 and then 2017, 2018, 2019. Yet everything was lost in 10 days. It's hard for them to do more at this point. Like when the facts on the ground has changed. But I think the biggest culprit is a U.S. sanction. A U.S. sanction. This was a design outcome of the U.S. sanction. And you worked.
And I also think that Turkey played a major role in this because Assad was adamantly against turning Idlib into a sanctuary for Turkish-backed rebels, but it was under Russia's insistence because Russia was trying to broker a whole bunch of things, and that became the incubator for all of this for the buildup of the terrorists. But Assad was adamantly against that. I remember I even have an article from that saved in my email when Assad was saying we can't allow them, but Russia's insistent because Russia was working on a few things and Russia needed Turkey on side or out of the way for what later on for what was going on between the buildup of forces in the Donbass and all of this stuff like this. So I see what you're saying, but I want to pivot to something else because this hits home right here. I want to play this 3-minute clip. It's about China. It's about the United States because the United States' ultimate goal is China because they understand that China is a non-Western, non-white nation that will not capitulate to the demands of the West. And they are an independent and sovereign nation in every way possible. And this is unacceptable to the empire. So I want to play a little clip to show how the United States is still pivoting to China. I mean, to try to take on China. Even in its weakened position, is doing that. So listen.
Gilbert Doctorow is an independent international affairs analyst who joins us from Brussels. Welcome. So the fact that this has not happened in quite some time, this delivery of this type of equipment, the Abraham tanks, what do you think it means in terms of the timing?
Well, this is in keeping with what the United States is doing in Ukraine in the final days of the Biden administration. The Biden administration is preparing complications in relations with China, which will pass then to Trump, and perhaps in the hope that they will keep him so busy on international affairs, turning back the mess that they are leaving with him, that he won't have a chance to implement his domestic policies, which are very much against what Biden has been doing for the last 4 years. The delivery of the tanks is a complication on the already simmering hostilities between China and the United States over the visit to the U.S. by the Taiwanese president that just took place, and which provoked China to implement the biggest military exercises around Taiwan and in the South China and East China Seas that we have seen in decades. Therefore, we can expect there will be a strong and robust Chinese response to this latest complication, this latest provocation.
Are we going to see a more ramped up effort by the U.S. When Trump comes in terms of what a conflict is brewing, so to speak, between the U.S. and China over that issue on Taiwan?
There is a lot of conflicting interpretation, both in major media and in alternative media in the States and in Western Europe, over how Mr. Trump will conduct himself. If you listen to his words are tough and indicative of a policy of prioritizing conflict with China over all other international disputes or problems that the United States is involved in around the world. However, the other side of the story is that he may have gathered under his tent all of those very aggressive anti-Chinese and anti-Russian politicians who have prominence in the States. He's gathered them into one room, all of them reporting to him, with the intent to beat them up and to remove from the public space these very loud-mouthed critics.
Okay, it looks like we have lost Gilbert Doctorow. That was Gilbert Doctorow speaking to us, independent affairs analyst there.
Now the United States has gone against the wishes and the demands of China, and they have supplied Abraham tank. We know that is a token, but supplied them to Chinese Taipei. For those of you who are watching who do not know what Chinese Taipei is, that's Taiwan, the island of Taiwan. And we see an article comes out in Sputnik today, and it comes out 16 hours ago, and it says U.S. chip suppression won't stop Chinese industry's development, will only make them stronger. And the first paragraph reads like this. Recently, one day after the U.S. announced yet another round of restrictions on chip sales to Chinese firms, 4 Chinese industry associations, including the China Semiconductor Industry Association and the Internet Society of China, issued firmly worded statements declaring that U.S. chip products are no longer safe and reliable. And after that, they come out with another article says, why is U.S. beefing up its military grip on Guam and other unincorporated territories? So it looks like while everybody is looking at the Ukrainian crisis and everybody in the West is looking at what is going on in West Asia, they are missing the United States is trying to sow seeds of division between mainland China and the province of Taiwan, and also trying to build up troops and weapons to try to cower China.
Well, the United States has always done this, and the U.S. has done this since 1949. This is nothing new. and Taiwan paid $1.2 billion for those Abrams tanks. I mean, I used to laugh at this. What the heck are you gonna do with Abrams tanks on a small island? I mean, by the time you need to use those tanks, it'll be too late. If the Chinese People's Liberation Army has already landed, I'm sorry, but it's too late. Those tanks aren't going to do shit. I mean, we saw this on the battlefield in Ukraine. Those tanks are easy targets for drones, and China can produce millions of them. But this again, this is, by the way, Taiwan has paid for those tanks during the last administration, during the last the last Taiwan presidential administration, and U.S. is only delivering now. So I don't know if people remember during the last Senate budget bills where they approved the deliveries to Ukraine, to Taiwan, etc. It says $8 billion was allocated to Taiwan. So a lot of Americans thought, oh, U.S. is giving Taiwan $8 billion. No. Taiwan paid $8 billion to United States. And United States has not delivered those weapons for a long time. And they're just now delivering those weapons that had promised to sell Taiwan. So the deal to purchase Abrams tanks was done many years ago under the last Taiwan leader, and now they're only able to deliver them right now. This is also because of the U.S. industrial capacity is not what it used to be. I mean, it can promise, like I said before, it's easy to print money. You just type in a couple of zeros into the computer, but it's another thing to actually manufacture, to make something tangible. You can print money all you want. That's not going to equate to manufacturing power, and the manufacturing power resides in China right now. And so U.S. was not able to deliver those Abrams tanks for many years, not because they're worried about China's reaction. It's because the bottleneck in the U.S.'s own military-industrial complex production process. Because now the U.S. has hollowed out its manufacturing for so long, for 40 years. Now it's coming to impact the U.S. military-industrial complex itself, because the U.S. military-industrial complex actually source many components. A lot of their supply chain is in China, by the way. They depend on parts from China. And Pentagon has looked into this and said, sorry, we can't decouple from China. Lockheed Martin CEO also said the same thing. Like, sorry, we can't decouple from China. We need a lot of essential ingredients. This is why China recently announced the ban on germanium, gallium, antimony to the United States, because these metals are essential for military applications. They're going to need them in their F-35s and those big ships, big destroyers. And U.S. might be able to run on its stockpile for a while, because they have stockpile in anticipation of the Chinese ban. But let's see how long those stockpile are going to last, because China has figured out, hey, look at these critical materials. They actually they're not that expensive. So we're actually not making tons of money from exporting them. But they're critical to the U.S. military. It's almost a no-brainer to cut them off. So China has hit back against the U.S. sanctions. You know what? You don't want to sell us semiconductors? We're going to cut off all the essential ingredient you need to make semiconductors. You're not going to produce gallium, germanium, and antimony anytime soon. And then you have all these U.S. economists, senior economists, saying, "Oh, we have plenty of mines. We just had a new discovery. We just need to open a new mine." So, like, sorry, this is, even if it was just as simple as dig the dirt from the ground, a new mine from start to put into operation takes several years, right? And then you have to process the metal, everything. But germanium and gallium are those metals are not profitable to actually to dig out of the earth and process them. This is why they are byproduct of making other metals. So gallium is a byproduct of making aluminum. And US, if you look at the US aluminum production, it has been declining since 1980s. It reached a peak in 1980 and it has going down ever since. And one of the things about aluminum production is it consumes tons of electricity. And if you look at the US power generation, it's flat. It's flat for 20 years, since late 1990s. So there's no extra power generation to put up a new aluminum plant. Not to mention aluminum plant will take years to build and bring it to operation. And then you need to build up power plants. That's not going to happen anytime soon. People don't understand. This is a whole ecosystem you have to build, and to build that you need chemical engineers, you need mechanical engineers. You need all this engineering talent that U.S. is no longer in produce because if you compare to the STEM graduates. Produced by America. It's about 500. They produce about 500,000 STEM graduates each year. China produced 4.7 million STEM graduates each year, and so the ratio is not even close. And this is why traditionally U.S. import from other countries. They do brain drain other countries by attracting talents from the rest of the world, mostly from China, India, but also Eastern Europe, from Russia, former Soviet Union. But the pool from former Soviet Union has dried up by now. That U.S. got a big boost after the collapse of the Cold War. They got a lot of the Soviet trained STEM engineers for cheap, but now that pool has dried up. And now all these xenophobia in U.S. is leading them to prosecute all the Chinese scientists and Chinese engineers in U.S. So they're forcing them to go back. So, but a lot the American mentality again is like, oh, we can always print money, so we can enough money, people will come. Well, good luck, because I came to United States in 1990. My dad was was a grad student in University of Illinois. I went to my dad's research lab. It's almost all Chinese. So I mean, I don't think these people understand how much American research institutions depend on the Chinese labor and Chinese researchers. So once they shut down that pipeline, it's not going to get any better. But they still think, oh, it's no problem. Okay, we can still mine top talent from the rest of the world. We'll see. Again, it's going to take time. It's not going to it's not like you snap your finger and all the human capital replacement will be found, and all the mines will suddenly open, all the power plant will suddenly come in line, and all the aluminum plants. We're talking about multi-generation effort if they're really serious about re-industrialize America. There has been a serious knowledge gap that existed in United States about manufacturing, because U.S. have hollow out the manufacturing for 40 years. So what that means is you have a couple generations growing up that was not getting the training, that was lacks of knowledge to do manufacturing anymore. So China can execute on industrial policy because they always have 5-year plan, 10-year plan, etc. United States, are you kidding me? You have one new president in 4 years, and they all throw out the old policy. You expect the United States to carry out like a long-term national plan for 10, 20 years? That's not going to happen. I'm sorry. That's not going to happen. U.S. So it needs an overhaul of U.S. education system, U.S. infrastructure. It's gonna take generation. It's a generational effort, and that's not the U.S. system is designed to do. Everything U.S. system designed to do is to reap profit in the shortest amount of time. Like the Wall Street, it's all about quarter earning reports, and so they're not gonna look into 5 years from now, 10 years from now, 20 years from now. Are you kidding me? So I mean, at least they're aware of the problem, but I don't think they're gonna solve it in the U.S. because the U.S. system is not geared to solve that problem. U.S. system is not geared to build up America. U.S. system currently is geared to funnel all the wealth to the top, to the 1%. That's what it's designed to do, and it does that very well. It's not designed to make America great again. I'm sorry. And so, but back to Taiwan. Taiwan has bought or paid for all these weapons. They have been waiting for years for United States to deliver them. So again, this is where I said, but essentially they're paying protection money. They're not, the people in Taiwan understand this too, including Taiwanese leaders. They know they're just paying this money so they can make the U.S. Congress people happy that they can be on their side. This is how they, it's like paying the tribute to keep them on the good side. This is not really about providing real defense value for Taiwan, because those Abrams tanks are not going to provide much defense for Taiwan. It doesn't really make sense. It's just makes sense to continue to grease the wheel of the U.S. military-industrial complex. It's a grift, and U.S. will keep this grift going as long as it can. Of course, this have detrimental ties with U.S.-China relationship. It escalates tension in the Taiwan Strait, and of course, China responded. China recently launched one of the largest unprecedented exercise all over Taiwan. So every time Taiwan does something naughty or U.S. does something naughty regarding Taiwan, like the last time when Nancy Pelosi visited Taiwan, China launched military exercise. So this time they will launch an even bigger military exercise. And what's this military exercise simulating? They're practicing for blockade of Taiwan. Mm-hmm. The Chinese Navy is putting up a cordon all over the Taiwan islands. So this is the difference between Taiwan and Ukraine. People keep on making the analogy. Like, Taiwan is an island. Once you're going to have to reach the island by sea or by air. You're going to need absolute air and sea dominance, air superiority to even maintain a supply line to run to Taiwan. And we had a recent talk with there's a recent interview with the U.S. Indo-Pacific Command, the admiral, what's his name? I forgot his name, but he was the one who said, "Oh, we're gonna create a hellscape in the Taiwan Strait for the Chinese with thousands of unmanned drones, unmanned ships. It's gonna create an absolute nightmare for the Chinese." When I first heard that, I'm like, "You're gonna compete with China on industrial production? You're gonna compete with China on producing of unmanned vessels and unmanned drones? I mean, I don't know where you're gonna get thousands of them, but China can produce millions of them." But when he asked about it, because General Petraeus, the architect of U.S. policy in Iraq and Afghanistan, actually wrote an article in Wall Street Journal quoting the current admiral of U.S. Indo-Pacific Command, said, "Oh, we can create a hellscape in Taiwan Strait." So he was asked about this by a journalist, and then the admiral says, "Well, yes, but the problem is even after we create the hellscape in the Taiwan Strait, we need to plan on what happened afterwards, because even after that, we still need to maintain air and sea superiority to keep our forces in Okinawa safe. But how do I do that? How do I do that?" I mean, he just admitted there's no way. There's no way, because you are in China's front yard. China can just launch its missiles that's based in Chinese territory, and all your bases in Okinawa will be gone. This is also why Rumsfeld, even back in 2000, Rumsfeld had started this process of trying to pull back from Okinawa, but to build up Guam as a forward deploying base for United States, because they understand Okinawa is not really defensible in a real hot conflict. I mean, Okinawa falls into the Chinese missile range. And their goal for their allies like Japan, Australia, Philippines is to act as missile sponge to soak up enough Chinese missiles so there won't be enough Chinese missile left for Guam. But I don't think that's even gonna work, because now China have these like lights off 24/7 robotic automated factory that makes cruise missiles. They can just crank up cruise missiles nonstop 24/7 by completely automated production line. And the Guam is not safe. But they're fighting a kind of last ditch effort to preserve the U.S. hegemony in the Western Pacific. Whenever they ask why is U.S. willing to risk a nuclear war in Taiwan, they always say, "Oh, it's about our credibility. It's about our strength. We have to show our strength. To show their allies we're serious about staying in Indo-Pacific." When you talk so much about strength and proving your strength, it probably means you're not as powerful as you think you are. A real powerful person, Mike Tyson, does not need to go around telling people, "Look at how powerful I am." People would just know, "Oh, you're Mike Tyson. I'll back off." But right now, not many people in America have realized this, because they have been hoodwinked by their own media. They think it's gonna be so simple. That's why there's so many people posting on X saying, "Oh, the Houthis about to find out why we don't have healthcare." Well, Houthis still don't know why Americans don't have healthcare, and they can't even take on Houthis. They think they can take on China. I mean, this is crazy talk.
And Carl, don't forget that there was a report that just came out saying that China is testing a hypersonic drone.
Yes.
A hypersonic, not just missiles. They have they have something that is a little bit more advanced than the THAAD system. I was reading about that too. That some Chinese scholars say that can engage hypersonic missiles. So China is working on a triad like that: hypersonic drones, hypersonic missiles, which they have in a nice quantity, and hypersonic air defense systems. So, I mean, in all the while, the United States, if they're going to have thousands of drones there, they must be getting ready to make a huge purchase from Temu or something, because they have no industry for that.
I'm waiting for all the Copian coming out to say, "Oh, China stole our intellectual property. That's why United States no longer have hypersonic missiles." Because China stole it, so U.S. don't have it anymore. Yeah, people are gonna be in for a rude awakening, because a lot of Americans they really still think China is like their image of China is still stuck like 50, 60 years ago, like when China was a poor and undeveloped country. They still think that. I mean, there's still plenty of Americans who think China is just a place where they make shoes and toys. So of course, in their mental in their mindset, of course, if the news come out that China has a hypersonic missile, of course they stole it from us. This is why we don't have it anymore. But anyway, having said that, I don't think a war is imminent in Taiwan Strait, because the Pentagon still, I don't think this is very interesting. I was listening to the Jeffrey Sachs interview on Tucker Carlson. He mentioned the New York Times article about U.S. military is preparing to fight a war against China. And so he called up the reporter who wrote the article. He's like, well, it's a good thing that you're highlighting this because, it's good that you're finally reporting this because we won't be able to we won't be able to hear about this after the war starts because there won't be anyone left. And the reporter said, well, actually, I wrote in my article, I mentioned 3 times that Pentagon do not want this. Pentagon do not want to have a war with China. But my editor removed them, all of them, and then published it without my knowledge. So it seems like there's some forces in the United States wanted a war with China. Even though Pentagon, they're comfortable to keep the grift with the military-industrial complex going, where the top brass can continue to enjoy kickback on all this arms manufacturing by selling weapons to Taiwan. But there are other factions in the United States, deep state, that want to stow the to crank up the heat, to create actively promoting for a conflict. But otherwise, how would you explain that? Why would they remove the 3 places where the author mentioned that Pentagon do not actually want a war? So we're gonna have to see kind of the battle playing out in the Trump's cabinet because one of the big Trump supporters is Yilang, and Yilang has big assets in China. He has his Shanghai Gigafactory in China. So then you have all the crazy neocons on the other side. So we're gonna have to see how this battle will shape up when January comes. It's gonna be comedy regardless. I have my popcorn ready, Rasheed.
Shout out to Vera. Thank you for becoming a channel member. We really appreciate it. Everybody give Vera some claps. I really appreciate it. Carl, also, we were talking about how the system is a grift. These people set up things so that they can grift off the people, and how corrupt the system is in the military-industrial complex. And for America to believe that she can compete with China when you have crimes like Bernie Madoff, when they go to cushy jails and then the media stop reporting on them and some of their friends get off after stealing tens of billions of dollars, then the man on the street is hungry and he goes into the store and steals a candy bar and gets killed or put into prison for 50 years. I was reading something that came up on RT today, and the name of the article is China Execute Former Top Government Official. And it says Li Jianping was sentenced to death for embezzling over $400 million. $400 million is chump change to Bernie Madoff and his associates. And yet China takes it very serious about corruption. And in China, I'm looking at more of these stories where you don't have the lobbyists like you have in the West, or specifically in America. They don't make policy. It's the government makes the policy, and they tell the corporations what they need to do, and not the other way around here, like in the Western world. And I believe that is one of the main bombs at the base of Western so-called domination and competitiveness. What do you have to say about that?
I mean, U.S. you'll be rewarded for that kind of thing. Like, the people who attend, who goes to Epstein's Island, they run for U.S. presidents. I mean, come on. This is just a norm in the United States. People wouldn't bat an eye. This is actually why the Western press always acts shocked when China does that, when China executes their corrupt officials. How could you do that? How could you do that? You're so inhumane. Where's the human rights? Where's the human rights for the corrupt officials? Where's the human rights for corruption? this reminds me of the Robertson meme where he says, "Oh, Lord Jesus, please give me what they have." Like a lot of Americans will very much like to be U.S. to be more like China, to have our Trump official getting executed. But we all know that's not going to happen.
Oh, Carl, I'm not going to hold you much longer because we got to do this again. But for those of you who didn't understand what Carl said, Carl was making a reference to Trump, okay? When he said that these people on Madoff Island can run for president, you have Obama, you have Trump, all of these guys, and nobody was prosecuted for going there. And you have somebody that was embezzling, a government official and an executive that was embezzling $400 million, and he appealed and lost his appeal, and they put the axe to him. I'm telling you, and that's the way that it's supposed to be to keep corruption from taking over the nation. And it seems like there's no political will, and there's no will at all to confront that by government officials, because it seems like in America, in the West, everybody is bought and paid by the lobbyists and the corporations. What do you have to say in closing, Carl?
We live in interesting times, Rasheed. I mean, people always ask why I'm always cracking up on the show when we're talking about very serious matter. But I will never stop laughing. I will never stop laughing for the American imperial decline, because this is dark comedy. And I always have my popcorns ready.
On that note, thank you, my brother, for joining me. We'll hook up again and do episode 13 coming up real soon. Thank you, Carl, for everything, man. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Rasheed.
Everybody, thank you all